Hello, it's October 23rd, 2025. I'm with Professor Mohammad Marandi. He's from the University of Tehran. He's currently in Beijing. Professor, thank you for joining the Trends Journal.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
The big news today is the decision by the Israeli Knesset yesterday to hold a vote on the annexation of the West Bank, the occupied West Bank, and the fallout, at least in the U.S.
Oh, yeah, that was weird. That was weird. I was sort of confused by that. Now, I actually asked somebody about it, and they told me that it was a symbolic vote, some symbolic vote to recognize or a symbolic vote to annex the West Bank. I mean, what I would say to that is when I asked about it, somebody told me that it was a political stunt, that it had no practical significance. It was purely symbolic. I mean, look, if it was a political stunt, it was a very stupid political stunt, and I personally take some insult to it. The West Bank is not going to be annexed by Israel. The policy of the Trump administration is that the West Bank will not be annexed by Israel. That will continue to be our policy. And if people want to take symbolic votes, they can do that. But we certainly weren't happy about it. Thank you.
Even Netanyahu's own party and Netanyahu himself called the move provocative. Can you tell me, Professor, what a vote like that, actually Vance said it was a symbolic vote and nothing more than that. However, in your opinion, what does that vote tell the American government, if anything?
It tells the American people that the Israeli regime is the boss and that Zionists, they rule. They're the ones who are the deciders, as Bush would say. And I don't think the symbolism is all that important because at the end of the day, the Israeli regime is colonizing the West Bank at a very rapid pace, and they've been doing it for decades. And the West, the United States, the Europeans have always been looking away. They've been talking about the two-state solution and UN Security Council resolutions, but all these years, the regime has been stealing land, killing Palestinians, throwing them into prison, taking thousands of people hostage, and diplomats, Western diplomats based in Tel Aviv and elsewhere, they look away and pretend that all is well, and Western journalists based in Palestine, in occupied Palestine, they look away and pretend that all is well. That's what they've been doing. And after October the 7th, the pace of annexation has increased, some say tenfold. And yet still the West does nothing and says nothing. So that's always been a part of the plan. They knew that the whole two-state solution is just a way to distract attention away from what is happening in the West Bank and to silence people who are protesting by speaking about the two-state solution. But the reality has always been that the objective of the Israeli regime is to colonize the land, and the West, the United States, they assist them in doing so. A lot of the funding comes from, most of the funding comes from the West. So the symbolism in this vote isn't that important in itself. But what is, I think, in the fact that with regards to the annexation process, but the symbolism when it comes to showing who's top dog, I think that is more important. And it's quite clear that Vance, Trump, they're not the ones who determine the direction in which the Israeli regime takes and which Zionists take when it comes to our part of the world.
The Trump administration came out in opposition to the vote and said that Israel will not annex the occupied West Bank. That's not the position of the administration, even though you had people like Huckabee and other people in the administration indicate that they were at least open to the idea earlier. Have you seen a change in position at all from the Trump administration after the assassination attempt in Qatar? Has the administration, did they need to actually become more center in their position on Israel and the West Bank and Gaza after that strike? Do you think anything changed after that?
No, I don't think the U.S. position has changed in any meaningful way. And I don't believe that the strike on Qatar happened without U.S. knowledge. It's highly unlikely, almost impossible to imagine that the Israelis would secretly fly their jets over territory and fire missiles over territory where U.S. jets fly, where U.S. drones fly, and where U.S. bases uh, are they exist. Uh, Without a doubt, the Israelis coordinated with the Americans. Whether the Americans wanted them to do it or not is irrelevant. The Israelis told them beforehand, and the Americans stood down and let them do it. Again, whether they're happy about it or not is another issue altogether. But as in the past, it's always been that the Israeli regime did what it did, and it paid no price for carrying out acts of aggression, whether it's a war against Iran, whether it's genocidal strikes on Lebanon, whether it's the occupation of huge uh, amounts of territory in Syria, or most importantly, the Holocaust in Gaza. They do what they want, and ultimately, the Americans will stand by them. There have been no sanctions on the Israeli regime. There's no The Americans have not halted uh, the flow of weapons to the Israeli regime. So there's no reason why the Israeli regime should feel pressured to back down in its major policy decisions. So I don't think the attack on Qatar changed anything. What it did do is it made countries in the Persian Gulf region, these Arab family dictatorships, more apprehensive about the Israeli regime because they saw that U.S. protection is fake. It's not real when it comes to the Israeli regime. And I think that both the United States and the Israelis would like in the Persian Gulf region is for these family dictatorships to be fearful of the regime so that the Americans can have more control. I think what the Americans want through the Israeli regime is to dominate uh, the oil production centers of West Asia. And if you put that alongside Venezuela, then I think it makes a lot of sense. If the Americans are able to, through the Israelis, have control of the flow of oil and gas in Latin America and in the Persian Gulf, then that weakens the position of China substantially. So I don't think there's all that much. Uh, I don't think that there are all that many differences necessarily between the United States and the Israeli regime, even when it comes to the attack on Qatar. But it does make these countries in the Persian Gulf, these family dictatorships, fearful.
Are they afraid of humiliation because you had Smotrich, the Israeli finance minister? He came out today and he talked about how the Abraham Accords isn't that important. And he actually insulted the Saudis and he said they can go on riding their camels while Israel just keeps bettering its economy and increasing output. Do comments like that, does that anger Saudi leadership, at least maybe put behind closed doors? Does that hurt Israel in the region? Or is that almost just, I know Netanyahu earlier with the Gaza genocide, he came out and he insulted the Saudis and said that they should take the Palestinians from Gaza in. And they had like a little bit of a tit for tat there. So a comment from Smotrich, what's your take? Is that just an emboldened Israel at the moment? Or is that fake strength, an actual weakness?
I think it shows how irrational and foolish the Israeli regime is, and that what it is doing is that it's shooting itself in the foot. The last 2 years have been catastrophic for the regime. There's no doubt about that. Western media can say that the Israelis have won the battles and that sort of nonsense, but it's obviously not the case. And they did not win militarily in Lebanon. They did not win militarily in Gaza. And the same is true with Yemen. And of course, there's no doubt that they were on the losing side with Iran. That's why Netanyahu was begging Trump for the last 3-4 days to end the war. But most importantly, by far, is the fact that the Israeli regime has been demolished as a as a legitimate regime in the eyes of the world. The world no longer sees the regime as normal. They see it as abnormal. They see it as genocidal and evil. And this, I think, is the greatest defeat of all, both for the Israeli regime, but also for the collective West, which has been supporting this Holocaust for the past 2 years. So I don't think that Netanyahu and his allies are very rational actors. The reason why Netanyahu has been continuing this genocide, despite the fact that it's been destroying the regime in the eyes of the world, is because Netanyahu wants to remain in power, because he does not want to go to jail. So he's doing something that is damaging the Israeli regime in an it's doing irreversible damage because it serves his interest. And his allies, of course, are fanatical, and they're not rational. So what they are by making such statements, whether it's Netanyahu, as you pointed out earlier, or his allies now, what they're doing is that they're actually weakening Saudi Arabia. They're weakening all of these countries that have been silent or complicit during the last 2 years. In fact, Trump has been doing the same by dragging all these regional leaders to Egypt and humiliating them in front of their populations. And these leaders, by basically whitewashing the genocide through their participation in that circus in Egypt, they've all been weakened.
You're talking about the signing of the ceasefire. You're talking about a week and a half ago when they went to Egypt to sign the ceasefire. And I don't think Hamas or Israeli officials were even there, correct?
Exactly. Hamas did not participate. Iran did not participate because Iran did not believe that this ceremony would be anything but a whitewashing of U.S. and Israeli crimes. And we saw how the Qatari and the Turkish and the Israeli officials were hugging each other. This is not good for any of these governments and regimes. And what the insults directed towards Saudi Arabia are not good for Saudi Arabia. All of these actions, all of the events in the last 2 years have not only weakened the Israeli regime because the world now despises it, but it weakens all of these leaders in the region that are in the American camp because they are seen as complicit.
Everyone, you might have just seen a little bit of a glitch there. That's because we're having a little bit of an internet connectivity issue. But we were talking about Gaza. Professor, the people who are enthusiastic and optimistic about the ceasefire say that Trump put his neck out here. He put his name on the line, his reputation on the line, that he's going to do everything that he can to make sure that the ceasefire is successful. And even though Israel had violations and has been killing Palestinians, the ceasefire is still in place. There's still discussions about starting a phase 2. Steve Witkoff mentioned that recently. Is this the closest that we've come to an end to what's going on in Gaza, the genocide that's going on in Gaza? Is this the closest is this the closest point to ending the war, in your opinion?
No, not at all. First of all, there's really no real ceasefire. They've killed lots of Palestinians since the so-called ceasefire began, and the Americans have done nothing about it. They don't punish the Israelis, so the Israeli regime can kill whenever they want. They've murdered Palestinians today, just like they murdered 2 Lebanese citizens today. Every day they're bombing Lebanon. Every day they're bombing Gaza, and there's supposedly a ceasefire both between the Israeli regime in Lebanon and between the Israeli regime in Gaza. So that's not a ceasefire. This is just decreasing the number of people who are slaughtered on a daily basis. And as we all know, the Israeli regime is not allowing food aid to get in the quantities that they promised. About 15%, I think, of what was promised, according to the agreement, is being let through. Yet Western media, Western governments are not saying anything about it. And by the way, this shows that the Israeli regime was always lying. During the height of the Holocaust, they were saying that we can't get food in because there's a war going on, or it's difficult, or Hamas is stealing the food and all that sort of nonsense. Well, now there's a ceasefire, yet they're not allowing the food to get in. So they've been weaponizing baby formula back then, and they're weaponizing it now. And now, by weaponizing baby formula and starving children, they're showing that everything that they did in the past was as was claimed by everyone else, and that was to create starvation, to kill children, to stunt the growth of infants and young girls and boys. That was the objective, just as the slaughter of these men, women, and children was about decreasing the population of the Palestinian people. So there is no ceasefire. There's just a decrease in the slaughter, but at least fewer Palestinians are being killed. So I don't think that phase two is going to get very far either, because the United States is not sincere. The United States will try to uh, push forward in a way in which the deal leads to capitulation on the side of the Palestinian people. They want the Palestinians to capitulate and to surrender, and that's not going to happen. And even if Netanyahu restarts the genocide, it would be humiliating for Trump at one level, obviously, because it will show that he's weak. But Trump is shameless. He'll just blame Hamas. He'll blame the Palestinians, and he'll continue to provide the Israeli regime with bunker busters so that they can slaughter women and children. As you know, for me, it's clear as day that the Americans and the regime in Washington and the regime in Tel Aviv, they are on the same page. And whether Trump is happy about things or not, it really doesn't make a difference, because he is not going to force the Israeli regime to make any make any significant move that runs against the interests of Netanyahu. The reason why Trump put the so-called peace deal forward, this fake peace deal, was because Netanyahu was failing. He was not achieving any final victory, and the world had turned against the Israeli regime, and the world had turned against the United States, and the people of the United States are turning against the Israeli regime and against its supporters in the United States. So many Zionists in the United States are concerned about the situation. So I think the fake peace deal was to try to rehabilitate Trump and Netanyahu, and to try to blame the victims for the genocide by trying to put the blame on Hamas and the resistance. And sadly, even though this is all fake, but the fact that these regional leaders went to Cairo for that circus with Trump as the ringmaster, they helped whitewash the crimes of Trump and Netanyahu. Although the world is not going to change its position, people across the world recognize that Trump and Netanyahu are genocidal. But those regional leaders that went to Cairo betrayed the Palestinian cause, and I think the damage that they've done to the Palestinian people was basically because they wanted to gain something for themselves by doing this and pleasing Trump.
It was interesting. Right after the peace deal was signed, Trump was really praised as this Nobel Peace Prize winner. He should have won, and no one's ever brought peace like this. It's a biblical miracle that Trump was able to secure such an amazing deal. And I when I was reading all these comments, I was like, wow, this seems like an effort to quickly put what happened there and how he gave the green light back in March for Israel to ramp up the genocide in Gaza. It was just remarkable to see these people come out, and media outlets come out and say that this guy deserves a Nobel Peace Prize like no other. I had a quick question for you, Professor.
Well, all I can say about this is that Kafka couldn't have written a novel so dystopian.
I want to know your opinion. Of course, this is impossible for anyone to know, but if Harris was elected president, do you think the Palestinians would have been better off or worse off or is it a push? It doesn't matter who's there.
I don't think it makes any fundamental difference. Maybe there would be different tactics, but at the end of the day, the United States, the British, the Germans, the Europeans, the Australians, these regimes support the genocide. And these regimes will allow Netanyahu to get away with the extermination of the Palestinian people, the last Palestinian, if they're allowed to do it. The problem is that people across the West and across the world, of course, have woken up to the reality that this regime is genocidal, it's ethno-supremacist, it's carrying out ethnic cleansing, and they're learning a lot about the history of Palestine and how these people never belonged in Palestine. So there's been a great global awakening. But if that hadn't happened, have no doubt that whether it's Trump or Biden or anyone else in the White House or Obama, it doesn't matter. They would support Netanyahu until the last Palestinian is killed. So yes, the tactics may differ, but the ultimate aim would not change, and that is allowing the Israeli regime to expand. They've under Biden, the genocide began and continued, and Biden lied about the dead babies and the beheadings and the rapes, and so did the Western media, and so did the state, the Secretary of State and U.S. elites, in order to facilitate the genocide. And when Trump came to power, he continued with the same policies. So no, I don't believe if she was president, it would have made any major difference. In a way, Trump is worse for Israel and for the regime in Washington because he is crude in his behavior. He is less sophisticated. He says the quiet part out loud. And his behavior, his speech, for example, his speech in front of the Knesset basically was an admission that he is Israeli first, and that a Zionist billionaire dictates U.S. foreign policy.
Yeah, Miriam Adelson. Yeah,
exactly. Or in Cairo, he basically ridiculed and humiliated all the U.S. allies across the region, whether it's Erdogan or whether it's Sisi or anyone else. It makes no difference to him. So I think that Trump's damage to the United States is greater than Biden's or a potential Kamala Harris in the White House, or hypothetically speaking, Kamala Harris if she was in the White House.
And my last question to you, Professor Marandi, everyone follow him on X. It's a great account to follow. My last question is, I'm in Los Angeles now, but I'm from New York. I was born in Brooklyn, and we have a mayoral race going on right now, and Zoran Mamdani looks like he's going to win, and it looks like Curtis Sliwa, the Republican's not going to back out. And even if he did drop out, it looks like Cuomo might not have the votes even in that scenario. Do you see his success or potential success tied in any way to Israel's popularity in the U.S.? Is this a bellwether, or is this just a one-of election? Should Democrats across the U.S. be paying attention?
Well, I don't want to comment on him personally because there are differing views. Some say that he is already shifting his language and he's moving towards becoming another Sanders or AOC and an establishment figure, and others who believe that he is somewhat different. I'm not in a position. I don't think it's appropriate for me to enter that discussion. But I do think it is a sign of change, regardless of who he is and what he stands for and what he really wants to do. I think it is a sign of change, especially in a city where there's an enormous Jewish presence. And I think while the polls do indicate, apparently, if I'm not mistaken, the polls that I saw a while back, that the majority of the Jews in the United States still support the Israeli regime. But in my conversations, and I haven't seen the numbers, with Jews who are opposed to Zionism and friends of mine, they are saying the youth in Jewish communities across the United States are turning away from the Israeli regime in significant numbers. And I think that, first of all, that shows that Zionism is not Judaism. I think that these Jews who are standing up against Zionism are doing a great service to humanity, and also they're showing very clearly that this Holocaust is not being carried out by Jews. It's being carried out by Zionists, which are both Christian and Jewish, and many Muslims who are collaborating with them, and they are also implicated in this genocide. But I think it does show that the United States is changing, and that people in New York do not like the status quo, and the status quo is corrupt, and they have hope that this gentleman will help the disenfranchised and stand up against the oligarchs. But I think they also are taking note of the fact that he has been critical of the Israeli regime, and the fact that Zionists oppose him, I think, is an incentive for many people to support him. So I do think it is a sign that American society is shifting, and there are many other signs also. But again, I don't want to comment on him and what he stands for and where things are going to go. I really don't know. I have my own ideas, but I don't have any. I can't say for sure what he will do if he becomes mayor.
Professor Mohammad Marandi, thank you for joining the Trends Journal.
Thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure.